Hafa-day, I'm Jolene Toves, and this is Coffee with the Candidates. Joining me here today is Vincent Borja, who's running under the Republican ticket for a senator. Thank you for joining us here today. So first off, let's start off with why you chose to run for office this year.
For me, we all have children, and I don't want them to be forced to make the decision I had to make when I graduated from high school, and that was to either join the military or work a low-wage job. For me, my father passed away when I was a senior in high school, drugs, and so I felt I needed to help my grandmother help my grandmother financially. So I joined the Army, did 3 combat tours, got out, moved back home, and here I am.
All right. Now, one of the items in your campaign platform is accountability. Mm-hmm. And, during these times where the transparency of government spending is heightened, what do you think needs to occur in order for us to achieve not only accountability, but better spending habits?
I think, we need to look at where our priorities at. And, if it's one thing I think that we can do better as leaders, especially the current administration and the current leadership in the legislature, is to be more present to the community. And I think that, when the pandemic started, we were put on lockdown. I get it, it was new and everybody was still kind of adjusting to that. I think if it's one thing that the public and the community needed more was to hear from our leaders, if not on a daily basis, at least every other day. And I think that that's kind of where the trust was broken. Whether it be waiting for the pandemic assistance or waiting for food to come out or some kind of assistance, I think we could have done a better job, at least just communicating to the community where we are, what we're waiting on, here's what we have, and to take more questions, because I think that the community felt more restricted as to what could be asked and how many questions could have been asked. And so I think it starts there, because like in any relationship, if there's no open communication, it's definitely not going to work. And in a government where thousands of people are looking up to you, I think that that's very important.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about accountability in spending. Mm-hmm. Where would you trim the fat if you could, looking at our government expenses and given the current pandemic that we're in, where would you trim that fat off?
I think, so it's going to be, I think it's not about trimming, right? I think it's more about looking at what's available and seeing how we can continue to deliver government service at a more streamlined and efficient way. When I moved back in 2011 after I got out of the Army, and living in the States for a little bit and moving to Europe, even when I was in Iraq serving a couple tours, just the efficiency and how far behind we are, I think that's where we can start looking at. I think if we start using automation and digital processes, it'll help save the government a lot more money, save some money on I don't think it's about cutting personnel, but it's how can we maximize the use of our resources, which is human, right? Because I think that's usually the biggest part. In business or in government, payroll is usually the biggest part of the expenses. So it's how can we maximize them to continue to provide the services, the basic services that the government's responsible for.
All right. Now, in keeping with line with this, how would you ensure better management of government funds so that Guam doesn't end up in a partial shutdown or even laying off any government employees? What would you do? I
think, so obviously the economy, we look at the news every day, about 30,000 plus employees either laid off or furloughed. So we need to look at, yes, we need to work at preparing Guam to bring the tourists back. But at the same time, I think moving forward, we need to look at diversifying our economy, right? And when I say diversifying, it's not just about bringing back the tourism, the service industry, but at the same time, we need to look at the middle wage industries, right? Jobs that we could bring to Guam. Because I think that's, yes, the service industry supports our economy, but I think, when you look at the quality of life of our people, if we look at industries that we can bring in that could bring them up to a higher wage, then I think that that's more important. And I think that that's where I want to be creative in how we encourage industries or businesses to come to Guam. But before we do that though, we need to look at how we attract them. Because I think for me, even as a small business owner, and I was just getting a consulting license to run a digital marketing agency, I mean, it was a 2-3 day process because you got to go from one place to another place. And I think the most frustrating part when I started looking at how to start a business was, oh, you got to go to the one-stop center. But wait, it's only a one-stop center on these days, during these hours, and on these other days you have to go. So I think that we need to start there, because if you think of like a vice president of a business trying to come to Guam to start a business, you really think they're going to go stand outside the one-stop, especially now with the social distancing, right? So I think we need to start there. Because I think that if we make it easier, I mean, I'm not saying to remove a lot of the restrictions so that anybody can come and start a business, right? Because it's more important that we have control, but at the same time, it's not just anybody. Because we need to look at ways that we can keep money on Guam, because that's more important, I think, at the end of the day. So I think streamlining the process is important, and then we can look at what industries to bring in.
Yes, you mentioned entrepreneurship. And looking at that early on in your bid for Senator, and you had stated that you wanted to initiate process improvements within the government of Guam to promote entrepreneurship to help boost the economy. Now you mentioned streamlining the one-stop center. But what other ways do you have in mind to make the attainability of being a small business owner more of an equal opportunity for island residents? I
think what we need to look at, and it's a missed opportunity, is e-commerce. It's a growing industry. I think right now they're at 30 trillion, and it's expected to grow. Obviously, now with the pandemic, right, everybody's ordering online. So I think that e-commerce is something that we need to look at, whether it be encouraging others to start their own online business here on Guam, or how can we facilitate, we talk about Guam being the hub to Asia, is how can we be the hub from Asia to the United States? So that's something that I'm looking to explore and looking at how Guam can play a pivotal role in how we move commerce, e-commerce between Asia and the United States.
All right. Now let's say you gain the favor of the community and you garner a seat in the legislature. What will be one of your first legislative initiatives?
So, we talk about, and when I try to answer this question before, when we talk about legislative policy or initiatives, I think right now, the bills, I don't have any specific bill that I want to introduce, because I think that it's not about right now, especially because of the limited resources. We need to start and look at the availability of resources, right? If it's one thing I learned when I was in the military and moving on to the private sector and teaching at the university and getting into e-commerce, is that organizations, whether it be public or private, they don't fail because of the lack of resources. We only fail because we lack being resourceful. And I think that that's where we need to start. We need to look at what is, at the bare minimum right now, because of limited resources, what do we have and how can we deliver government services, right? And so for me, it's looking at the government, do a top-down review of the finances, the resources, and start to, at least hold oversight and help realign to what is important right now to keep our island going, keep our economy going, and to ensure that our people are getting the services that they need.
All right. Now, of course, there's been a lot of limelight on the legislature at this time, and they've seen some negative comments or whatnot. What is something that you disagree with, a decision that was made in the legislature within the last 4 years that you didn't disagree with, that maybe you've done differently?
I think the priorities, when we look at the unemployment rate, even prior pandemic, right? I mean, even pre-pandemic, I'm sorry. And you look at the hospital, you look at let's shift over to the youth, because I think that's important, is that you look at a lot of the responses and a lot of the legislation that they've introduced, and to clear to put it out there. I'm a humble guy, so I'm not going to try and attack them, but I think that what's important is that when we look at, for me, and what has forced me to run, or I kind of ignited that fire, is that I think we need a more proactive type of leadership versus a reactive. Yes, they've done a decent job at putting band-aids on things. We have a problem, let's introduce a bill, let's get them the resources, versus like looking at, taking a holistic approach and looking at our island as a whole, because I think that we need to start looking at how can we prepare Guam for a better future, right? For the generations to come, versus like, let's deal with one problem at a time. Don't get me wrong, there are things that, yes, we need to take immediate action, but how can we be proactive, and how can we be more forward in our thinking and introduce policy or legislation or provide resources to ensure that we're building, we're taking one bite at a time, but we're making things better versus trying to put band-aids here and there until that the next legislature comes in and it becomes their problem. So I think that that's one of the biggest things that I think that has frustrated me with the current legislature. I get it, and I've met with some of the Democrats, and everybody has their own priorities. I get that, right? You ran on this and you ran on that. But to me, it's what's important to the people. I understand that you're not going to be able to give in and answer the needs of every single constituent. But at the end of the day, when you make a decision, you need to make sure that the decision affects, is going to benefit the entirety, right? The entire island, or at least most of the population. And it's something that we can grow from versus, okay, let's appease, the choir for now, and then we'll move on. And I think that's the consensus in the community, and that's the when you pulse the environment or the landscape of how our people feel, and I think that's where it's at.
All right. Now, on the lighter side, in 30 seconds, can you tell the community something that they may not right off know about you, that you would like them to know as you continue your journey for your bid as a senator?
Like most of you, I know what it's like to be hungry. Like most of you, I know what it's like to want help and not have the resources or the money. I've been there. I come from humble beginnings. I lived with my grandma most of my life, or as a kid on public assistance. Was fortunate enough to be given to join the military, and afforded a lot of the opportunity that has brought me today. And so, for the 30,000 employees that are out there furloughed or being laid off, I hear you, and I want to fight for you. For the kids hoping for a brighter future, I hear you, and I want to fight for you. And for the people of Guam that are demanding transparency and accountability, I hear you, and I want to fight for you. My name is Vincent Borja. I'm number 9 on the Republican ballot, and I humbly ask for your vote and support. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Vincent. Well, there you have it. Stay with us. We have more Coffee with Candidates coming up next.